Hello, my name is Michael. I'm a 55-year-old musician living in New York City with decreasing debt, increasing wealth, and an eye toward financial freedom. This is Midlife Money Moves, where I am documenting the process of turning this all around in time for retirement. Okay, so today, it's been a long time since I did this topic specifically. This is going to be chapter 2 in my Bankruptcy Chronicles. And I was just looking at my old video. Well, let me put one disclaimer at the beginning. This may turn into 2 videos. I haven't decided yet. So we'll see how long I go. And yeah, I just want to talk about this whole process. The last video I made about this was right when I decided to go ahead and file bankruptcy. It's probably a little after I made the decision. And that was way back in March. Now it's August. It's mid-August. And a couple of things have changed since then. So the first thing I want to talk about, and what I think will be the only topic of this video, is kind of like the prep that led up to actually filing my case, which I did almost 3 weeks. Then a couple days, it'll be 3 weeks since I filed. The other thing that I want to do is try to do this in with as little editing as possible, so I can just get this up. So I'm just going to talk through the different things that happened. In that last video, I was talking about using this attorney who was based in New York City, and I decided not to. Like, this was a long part of the process, and it was very stressful, like making the decision about what attorney to use. I want to shout out 2 things. One is the Ladylike Lawyer on TikTok. Her name is Adrienne. I can't remember her last name, but she's a bankruptcy attorney in Ohio. Watching her videos, I learned so much, and really she got me single-handedly pretty much to the other side of feeling ashamed about this process, to getting to a place where I realized this is a tool that I can use to like help me get in the flow of being a financially productive member of society. And, just kind of be able to have a fresh start. So I don't think I talked about this in the last video. There's a company called Ascend. It's tryascend.com. Yes, it's tryascend.com. And they refer you to different resources. I don't think they're a nonprofit. I think they get their money from referrals. But I liked 2 things about them. First one was that when I first reached out to them, it was probably a year ago. And I was kind of still do I want to file bankruptcy, or do I want to try to just follow this plan? I had a plan in place to get everything paid off in 5 years. If I followed the plan to the letter. And I talked to them, and cautiously, because any of those debt places make me really nervous. So I cautiously talked to them, and they told me your plan sounds pretty good. You might want to just stick with that. Let us know if you need help later. Which I was very impressed with, that they didn't try to sell me anything. They didn't try to push anything on me. And in fact, they were like, don't use any of these services. You might be okay. So fast forward to me deciding maybe I should, and I will file bankruptcy. I called them. They were the first company I called. They referred me to an attorney who was the first one I spoke to. But he's in Los Angeles, which made me nervous. But he's from, anyway, he practices in both California and New York. Anyway, I wound up going with this attorney. That's sort of a long story short. I might want to do a whole thing on Ascend, because I wound up talking to one of the founders, because a lot of different stuff happened, and maybe trust them even more. So I used them. I got my attorney, and I paid him, and the process began. One thing that was really challenging was, and I think I did this before I retained this lawyer. I paid a retainer fee, and then I paid his entire fee maybe a month later. One of the things that was really stressful about it, and I talked to probably 4 different attorneys, and all of them said the same thing, and I had already known this just from doing my own research. It seems so weird saying do your own research nowadays. Was to stop paying on my debt. All of this debt, I was definitely going to file bankruptcy, so it didn't make sense to pay it anymore. And all of that money wound up going to the attorney instead. But that also means all the collection calls start again. And It was rough. Like, that was, I think, the hardest thing. The hardest thing, people talk about how hard bankruptcy is. And for me, so far, the hardest thing was not deciding to do it. Like, I could have done this like a year ago. I don't regret not doing it sooner because I think that year of working through it and trying to power through really taught me a lot about running my finances that I hadn't learned. But like well before that, I did have collections calling all the time. Like I got everything turned around to the point where I wasn't getting calls anymore and I was, running my finances. So getting those calls again, this is the point, was really like old behavior, we would call it in AA. Like it really made me super uncomfortable to be dodging phone calls again, which I hadn't done for a long time because I was taking a lot of pride in getting on top of everything, and collection calls weren't happening anymore. My credit score got better. I mean, it was a few years even before I really started hardcore budgeting that I got everything. Hardcore budgeting, that sounds so funny. But that was really challenging to have those calls happening. So the next piece after I retained my attorney was to get on the phone with him, talk about my finances, send him documents. He mailed me something to sign a bunch of pages of, sent it back, and then we were about ready to file. And there's another piece. I'm trying to remember all the little details. There's a federal law that requires you to take a credit counseling course before you file bankruptcy and after, and they're online, and it's pretty much basics about budgeting. But I thought they were pretty solid. I've done both of them because I did file, but that's later in the story. So there was a lot of back and forth and details, but all told, I don't think the process of getting all that stuff together was that challenging. I think partly because I've been so on top of keeping track of all my books for so long, and also because I don't have any assets. I don't have a house. I don't have cars. I don't have anything that would have needed to be added to the bankruptcy. That's really it. I thought this was going to take a long time to talk through. Yeah, I mean, I guess I could talk numbers. Maybe I'll do that in the next video. We can sit with a spreadsheet, and I'll talk about the money that's going to be discharged. But I was going to have to wait. Like part of what happens in a bankruptcy is they look at all of your income. You have to sort of qualify through this means test to file. And if your income isn't below a certain amount, like all these different things get factored in. Because my income is so up and down, my annual income and my monthly expenses, including the payments on the debt that won't be discharged, which is the most recent 2 or 3 years of taxes that I owe, including all of that, I passed the means test. But the average of that includes my 2 very slow months of July and August. So we were going to file in July and then realize, like, oh, this doesn't show the slow months that are included every year. And like December is also very slow. So it looks like I make more money annually than I did. I don't know if I explained that in a good way. So we had to wait. We were going to wait till September. And I was like, no, please, I can't. But I mean, I had to. And it turned out like the IRS started getting a little bit more energetic with their collection threats. So we looked at all my books again at the end of July, and it turned out like, okay, including July, brings everything to where it needs to be. Let's file. So we filed. We filed my bankruptcy. And the couple of interesting things happened. One of the things that I know is, I knew would happen. And this is one of the things that's so great about bankruptcy is because it stops all collections. There's a stay, an automatic stay that's granted the moment you file. So I knew that once I filed, everyone would be notified electronically and no more collections would happen, including the IRS. And IRS hadn't done any collections. They were just sending letters. And because if you've watched my tax video, I'm pretty sure I talked about the fact that I have had collections happen with me with the IRS. And it's really not great. They don't do it immediately. Like they really warn you a lot. But once they do it, like they just can like take your money. Like it's the IRS. So I didn't want to get to that point. The next day after I filed, I still got a couple calls, and I decided to just answer one of them from a credit card. And the moment I said bankruptcy, they were like, "Okay, could you give us your case number?" I gave them the case number, and they said, "Okay, thanks," and my attorney's info, and that was it. So that's pretty much to now. The other weird thing is that my credit score jumped according to Credit Karma, which isn't precise. But it was interesting to see. Like I see all my other, like it's going to probably be well after my debt is discharged, that my credit score sort of settles. But the thing that's very interesting is my credit card dropped during those months that I wasn't paying. It's like 2 or 3 months of like late payments, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And then, but what happens when you file bankruptcy is your credit score, everything's closed. Even my zero credit cards that didn't have a balance, they got closed. But that's it. Everything, it'll show that those accounts existed. All of the payment history is gone. All of like whatever, anything, the entire history is gone. It just shows that it existed, for how long that account existed, and that it was discharged in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. So that's it. So my credit score on Credit Karma went up from like, it was the very low 500s at that point to like, it went up 173 points, I think. It was a real trip. So my credit score is probably going to rebound pretty quick. Although the bankruptcy will stay on there for 10 years, in my experience so far, knowing that things haven't settled, this is much easier than I thought it was going to be. Like, it's much easier than, I think of a day that I was really struggling for about a year. And the year of this channel, basically, because I think I started this channel just about a year ago, of really like trying to power through, and then, overspending or doing something impulsive, and like it was so much debt, like $80,000. And there was a day I was trying to talk to my boyfriend about it, and I was just like, I didn't know what to do. Like, I was starting to realize like this isn't sustainable, because I was working so much. I was panicked all the time about money. Like, because it really became clear, I'm in my 50s, as I mentioned, that there's not a backup plan. Like everything was really weighing on me, and I was just maxed out all the time. Living through that was much harder than the bankruptcy has been so far. So here's what happens next. In the beginning of September, like the second week of September, I'm going to have a meeting with the trustee of the court and my attorney, and whatever creditors will show up. It's called a 341 meeting. It's called the meeting of the creditors. From what I understand, creditors rarely show up, and basically it's just a meeting of me with the trustee, who's basically like, do you understand that this and this and this is what you have signed? Was it you that signed these? Do you understand this? Is there anything left? Basically, and it's like a 5-minute Zoom meeting. And then 60 days after that, probably in November, all of my dischargeable debts will be discharged. I had made a couple notes to myself about wanting to talk about like the emotional level of like the experience of kind of getting to this place. And like the relief, like, I don't even know how to talk about it. I did tell you about all that stress, and deciding to file bankruptcy kind of really gave me a sense of relief, because I had already stopped. There was this whole period, like that period between retaining a lawyer and stopping paying credit cards. It was this whole like nebulous time of like, is this even going to have, like, what's going on? Like, what happens if I finally get my attorney and he's like, oh, you can't do this? Then what do I do? But that didn't happen. So, I mean, that was a level of relief to have an attorney talk more specifically about my exact situation and have him be like, yeah, we're moving forward with this. And then filing it was another layer of relief and kind of excitement about, I've been doing all this work of budgeting and trying to get on top of all this stuff, which again, admittedly, and I say this as much as possible because I don't want anyone to think that I'm not taking responsibility. Like all of these mistakes, all this financial mess, I created it. I know exactly who's responsible for this, and it's me. There are other levels to, things that made it difficult for me to get on top of that stuff. But anyway, that's that. But it's really like all of that work was like, oh my God, that stress I was talking about and that weight and all that work to budget was really just all of the money that I was trying to make and working so hard was just going to past. And I was so worried. I'm still like worried about, am I going to be able to be in a decent place by the time I have to retire, whenever the time comes that I can't work anymore. But now like I feel like, okay, so now I keep doing this work and I could start like an emergency fund and really put money into an emergency fund and then really invest for retirement. So I'm not, in a terrible position when it's time for me to stop working. So it's nice to have. It's almost like before I was dragging my past, trying to drag myself out of the past so that I could start preparing for the future. And now I feel like, I can put all this energy into forward motion instead of trying to pull the past forward. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyway, that's where I'm at with the bankruptcy stuff right now. I guess I did fit it all in one video. Oh, I've only been talking for like 20 minutes. So that's where I'm at with all of this. Ask your questions. Should I do a live? I don't know if I can. It might be interesting to either do a Q&A where people ask me questions about what this experience has been like. Let me know what I should put in a following bankruptcy video too, because I want to do more of these because I feel like there's a lot of sort of misinformation and stigma around this process. And I don't know. And I don't think we should all feel ashamed of making mistakes. And or feel ashamed of using tools that are available to us to help. So, I don't know. I feel like talking about that a bit. That's it. Thanks for watching this. Click the like button, subscribe, tell your friends. Please comment and definitely ask me questions. Maybe I'll do a Q&A video. That might really help. There's like maybe a Q&A video, maybe a thing where I talk through. I mean, I could tell you in general, I have about $85,000 in debt. And of that, I will be left with $26,000 of tax debt that isn't dischargeable because it's too recent. And I've been talking in my budget thing about, what my priorities are in terms of getting out of that. So I'm not totally out of the water, but it's going to be a lot better. So that's where I'm at. Thanks for watching this. I feel like it may have been a little all over the place, but you might be used to that. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching this.